Hey, Gail.
Hi, Phoebes. You're
I just stepped away
frozen.
for a minute. Apologies. Okay.
You're frozen, freezing, frozen.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, there's a little bit of an echo.
Oh my. Okay. Well, hopefully the echo will resolve itself if we're try during the meeting to stay on mute, one person at a time talking. That usually helps with the echo. I don't hear an echo on my end, at least, so I can't talk if I hear myself talking back at me. Um,
No,
but
as soon
you're
as you
still
went
hearing
off
it.
camera, as
It
soon as you
went,
went
it
off
got
camera, the
better.
echo went away.
Okay. All right. Well, it's gonna be one of those days. That's okay. I'm glad you can make it. How's your tech holding up?
So far, so good. My voice and me are not holding up as well as the
Dale.
tech is, so that's good. Everybody seems to be sick. Hi, Carla.
Hi, Gail. How are you?
Okay, how are you?
I am okay. Thanks for asking. Oops, I think I should grab my charger in case I need it. Okay, I'll be right back.
Okay. Hey, Bridget.
Hi, Bridget.
Steves. Hey, Carla. Hi, Gail.
Hi, Bridget.
Hey, Gail, I don't know if you would have met Bridget yet, but she's been supporting us at the Agency of Natural Resources. She works with Bridget, you can say who you work for. You're here.
Thanks, Steves. Yeah, I work in the accessible assistance section with Megan Cousineau and Emily Rogers. You might have seen them on past calls. So I've been on a few calls kind of in the background. And yeah, just still learning the role and really enjoying it so far. It's been great. So
Well,
nice to
nice
meet
to
you.
meet you.
Hey, Trey. Welcome. Hi, Dale.
Hello.
Hi, greetings.
Greetings. So, I mean, I'm expecting small groups because you're already a fairly small group, and we split into two different meeting times to accommodate the fact that the poll split exactly down the middle for available times in November for a meeting, and I feel like we've got plenty of brainstorming and just talking through and what we want to do, that we didn't need to be at a sort of quorum decision making level to still have a really generative conversation. And I thought it might actually really serve the group to have some smaller group conversation that's not so much lots of business to slog through, but hey, let's take a moment and get to know each other better and what we're bringing to the table each. You all are bringing to the table each as advisory council members, and um, start to put together some tangible plans around how you all as advisory council members, um, want to see sort of the community engagement aspect of your role work and things. So here's Brittany. So we're gonna let folks keep coming in, and I'll share the agenda before I get into all that. But I just want to give some context that kind of looking forward to a small group today. I think it'll be nice. Hi, Brittany, Sophie.
Hello. Yeah.
Just gonna give us till 1:05, and then I'll start to get into it. All right. Can folks see the agenda on my screen okay? Cool. Cool. Head nods. All right. Great. So, welcome. I think we can go around and do intros for everybody on the call. We've got a full mix of advisory council members, some agency of natural resources support staff, and at least one member from the public, Dale. So we can go around and just acknowledge who's in the room. Take a minute to consent to our community agreements, and then just touch base and make sure we feel good about the agenda for today. And then, really, just Trey and Gail and Brittany, this is really your space for us to get into the questions at hand in this agenda. So please feel empowered to think about how you want to use these 2 hours together. Yeah, but we can just go around quickly, and I'm going to ask advisory council members to do a bit of a longer share. We could just go around first, just name, pronouns, if any other identifiers that feel important to share. If we're here as an advisory council member, as a support staff, or a member of the public. And yeah, and just one thing that we are feeling grateful for today in our natural environment as we come together. So I can go first. My name is Phoebes Potter, he, him, or they, them pronouns. I am support staff for the Agency of Natural Resources to the Advisory Council. And yeah, today I'm feeling a tremendous amount of gratitude for the sun, because this room gets icy cold at night, and I got lots of passive solar heat today. So I'm just like really appreciating that this morning. And I will pass to Carla.
Good afternoon, Carla Raimundi, she, her. I work at the Agency of Natural Resources as the Director of Civil Rights and Environmental Justice. I'm also the representative to the Interagency Advisory Council. Oh, no, that's a combination of the two bodies. Interagency Council for the Agency of Natural Resources. And today I am participating here as support staff for this meeting. So I'm going to try to ensure that I share documents that are relevant for the conversation. So thank you very much. Happy to be here. And I am grateful for the wind. It was kind of windy this morning, and I had left the window open just a little bit, and I could hear the trees and the leaves that are still on the trees making that wonderful rustling sound that I love. So I'm grateful for the wind. And I'll pass it on to another ANR staff support individual, Bridget.
Hi, everyone. I'm Bridget Phillips. I work in A&R in the Department of Environmental Conservation as an accessible assistance specialist. So part of my role is being both a DEC liaison and a member of the working group. And I'm here today as support staff, and I'm going to be taking notes for us. My pronouns are she, her. I'm grateful. So I live in Montpelier, and it's very hilly, as much of Vermont is. And I'm grateful for this one stretch of flat land in my neighborhood because I have a back injury and I'm working on walking and recovery. So I'm grateful for the one flat road that I found in Montpelier. I'll hand it off to Sophie.
Good morning, everybody. Or I guess it's afternoon now. Wow. My name is Sophie. I recently started with the Climate Action Office. My pronouns are she, her. I was feeling a lot of joy and delight for these ice patterns on my car that looked like feathers the other day, and just appreciating the unexpected beauty before my car warmed up. And I'll be listening in for the first until about 2 p.m. Thanks for having me. I'll pass it to Dale.
Thank you. My name is Dale Azaria. I'm a senior fellow with Conservation Law Foundation. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm attending as a member of the public. And So grateful to all of you for doing this hard work and looking forward to success. And I will pass it off to Trey.
Hey, everybody. I'm Trey Martin. I use he, him pronouns. I live and work in both in Montpelier. I'm at here today on behalf of the Vermont Housing Conservation Board, where I am the conservation director. But I'm also here appreciating this time of year, just the feeling of yielding to the transition, which is a little scary at first, and it seems like you don't want summer to end. And you see the light through the trees when the leaves are down, and it is beautiful. And people are raking leaves and sharing them on their gardens and stuff. So like the community comes out for this burst of energy, which is kind of nice. And like I said, I'll say for now. But I will pass it on to Susanna, who I see on screen here.
Hi, everybody. I'm Susanna Davis, the Racial Equity Director for the state. I'm a member of this working group, and I came in a few minutes late. Sorry, but it sounds like we're doing What Are We Grateful For, nature-wise. And I think that has been the prompt for the last few of these meetings. And I never, I usually just answer the question and move on, but I discovered something about myself with this prompt over a series of meetings, which is every time I answer this question in this group, every answer I give is saying that I'm grateful for something being either defiant or resilient. Every answer I've given has to do with like nature giving us the finger or something like that. And I think what that means is I resent the impact that humans have had on the environment so much. And I guess what I'm grateful for is when nature defies us and continues to thrive despite us. I think that is what is happening every time I answer this prompt. So I'm grateful for it because it's teaching me something about myself. And I think today what I'm grateful for is spiders, because I can't take these flies anymore. I can't do it. So I'm grateful for things that eat flies. And I'm going to pass it to Brittany. Have you already gone?
I have not, and I am, oh, I think I might be able to come on camera. I'm in my room's dark. Brittany Watson, she, her pronouns, and I am on the EJ Advisory Council. Something that I'm grateful for, this year is the first year I feel like I usually have always been really grateful for fall and love fall. This is my first year not being a fan of the fall season. I think something just kind of shifted in my mindset of seeing things go beautifully or change. I'm not as I think I'm more into the spring. So with that, I will say something that always remains consistent for me that I'm in awe of is sunsets. And last night in my area, we had a beautiful sunset. And so I appreciate that. Thanks. And I will pass to Gail.
Hi, everybody. Please excuse my voice. I'm kind of battling bronchitis. My name is Gail Pezzo. I am the board president at Westbury Homeowners Association, Mobile Home Park in Colchester. I'm on the EJ Advisory Council. I'm also just recently been appointed on the Mobile Home Task Force for Vermont. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm not a winter person, and I'm not usually grateful for when the fall comes, although it's so beautiful. But my 8-year-old grandson, who I am extremely grateful for, reminded me the other day that I should be very grateful because when the snow comes, I get to see him do his awesome snowboarding in the winter, and that's why I should be grateful for the winter. Who else?
Jennifer?
I can't see on the screen who hasn't.
I'll jump in.
Thanks.
Thanks, Gail. Hi, everyone. I'm Jennifer Byrne. I'm with the Conservation Districts. I'm a member of the Advisory Council. And I know this is a little divergent, but I feel I agree with you, Susanna, as well. But when I saw the prompt, I was like, I am feeling grateful for humans as a part of the natural environment. And I'd like to recognize us as, animal species. So yeah, so that's what I'm feeling grateful for today. Grateful for all of you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, everyone. Really appreciate the check-ins. Thank you, Dale, member of the public, for joining us. Thank you, advisory council members, for being here. Just so it's clear for folks, we have 5 advisory council members present. Susanna, Trey, Gail, Jennifer, and Brittany. I scheduled 2 meetings to do the same agenda, knowing that would probably mean we wouldn't be in a quorum space making any official decisions. But the doodle poll came back split 50-50 in terms of a good option in November, and everybody wanted to get together as a smaller group. So this is the solution I came up with. So thank you for being here, and I look forward to what can happen in a smaller group context. So I really hope the 5 of you all really can take the time in the direction you want to take it today. There's a fairly loose agenda planned. But before I jump into that, just as healthy practice, let me drop our community agreements just into the chat so that we can have those available. And since, let's see, and I'll share my screen too.
I did it already, Phoebes.
Carla, thank you. Cool. So yeah, would anybody be willing or able to you can go around and each, since there are 5 of y'all, we could each read if you would each read one of the principles, that would be awesome. But let me pull it up on my screen so it's a little bit easier. Here we go.
I can do the first one. This is Susanna.
Thank you, Susanna.
Be present with yourself and one another. Be present with your body and feelings. If you need to take a break to take care of yourself, please do. Be present for one another by listening deeply.
I can do the next one.
Amazing. Y'all are great. Thank you. I'm sorry. I'm chaos in my share screen.
Calling in and calling out. Assume best intent, but attend to impact. We can stop things that are being said that are hurtful and be curious and create a space for learning. Tools include using oops or ouch to indicate a pause is needed.
Expect and accept non-closure. We are unlikely to leave here feeling 100% ready to go or to have everything on our agenda wrapped up, especially if we are committed to moving at the speed of trust.
Center respect. Be respectful, intentional, and work to build trust and create a safe and inviting space.
Okay. There's 5 in the chat.
Okay, I can
Gail,
take it.
appreciate you.
Share verbal and other space mindfully. Consider the balance of taking and making space. Move up, move back. Tools to do this include the acronym WAIT, why am I talking? And vocalizing support for another person's comment without repeating the same points that have already been made.
Thank you, Gail. Appreciate you. Okay, thanks everybody. So we have 2 agenda items for today's meeting. This is really meant to be sort of a brainstorming, refining ideas that have already been brainstorming space, to clarify the vision around how we want to position the advisory council in the implementation of the environmental justice law to sort of achieve the two goals of being a truly sort of, representative group and bridge to impacted communities, frontline communities, environmental justice focused populations. So ensuring their needs and interests are at the table. And in that, being a vehicle by which that information can directly influence the policy decisions and the policy making that the covered agencies that are involved in this law are responsible for. And, we've talked, so I want to anchor us into some of the specific aspects of this that we are responsible for. But I really wanted to take a chance for us to kind of regroup into, give you all a space to sort of reshare what you are bringing as an advisory council member to the group, sort of what aspect of that you're holding. So give ourselves a space to do that. And then, get into how, we can sort of, thinking about the definition of meaningful participation, think about how we want to really live that in our practices as a group and what we need to do that well. And I think there's been a lot of stops and starts in 2023 as we've tried to come online, and it'd be really powerful to sort of have a cohesive vision in 2024 for what our priorities are in terms of kicking off, this work in a way that we feel like the communities we represent voices truly are at the table at every step of the way as the law sort of envisions for meaningful participation. So I'm going to share the agenda, and I'd just love to hear from each of our advisory council members if you feel good about this agenda generally, and if there's anything in particular that you would really like to see us talk about in the context of these two agenda items. So once again, let me pull up the link to that, and
I put it on the
if
chat
anyone-
already, the agenda.
Okay, great, thank you. And there we go. Okay, and hopefully it's on the screen as well if that's working. So yeah, since there's just five of y'all, I think if we could just go around real quick, circle process, and just hear from each person how you feel about the agenda generally, the two major topics, and like anything in particular you would like us to see that we get to today in terms of things that you're thinking about. Anyone willing to go first?
I'll chime in. I think the agenda is fine for our time together today and who we have in the space. I'm looking forward to having a deeper dive into the meaningful participation model. Yeah, so thanks.
Great, thanks, Brittany.
I have a question, if we're going to touch on this at all, because it's at the last joint meeting, we talked a lot about moving these deadlines, and I would love to have that conversation here from the other council members on their thoughts and opinions on shifting all those deadlines. So I don't know if it's not really covered here, right? Is that not an intention for this meeting?
It's not specifically named on the agenda, but it's relevant to both topics. So I'd be happy to, give a kind of quick recap of what we talked about in the last meeting and space for folks who would like to kind of revisit that, that it certainly fits. It's relevant. Thanks, Jennifer.
I'll just agree with Brittany. Thumbs up on there's a lot here. I think that this space provided will be well filled. if we dig into all those topics. And glad to talk about the scheduling as well. So I think sometimes deadlines don't work. So I agree with Jennifer. Thank you for bringing that back up.
Yeah, and this is Susanna. I also am interested in digging into the second agenda item about the structure of the council and being in relationship with agencies, just because one of the things I just on the heels of a conversation I had this morning related to education, I want to protect this group from developing a relationship where it's too dependent on state agencies and is not forming independent opinions, or is somehow constrained by the limitations of what state government believes it can do versus what we believe it can do. So all that is to say, I think the agenda is fine, and I'm looking forward to getting into it.
Thank you. Gail, you feel okay about the agenda? I'm just checking you're still with us.
Yeah, I'm having really hard time with my voice. I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm fine with the
Oh,
agenda.
don't be sorry. Feel welcome to type questions or responses in the chat. That is available. Well, I would be happy to, if I see something come in the chat, pause and read it out loud for you, just so that it doesn't get lost in the chat flow as we're talking. So if that's supportive, please feel free to use that as well. And thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Of course. All right, great. So I'm hearing, yes, these are huge topics. Let's get into it. I'm hearing some context around the deadlines and sort of what the timeline for the implementation is would be helpful. Happy to kick off with a little context in that regard. And Susanna, I hear you about in the second agenda item being important to touch on, and some key things there. So great. So yeah, let's go ahead and take 30 minutes to drop into this first topic. I wanted to just I want to give a little context about, so let me think which thing first. So in terms of outcomes from these conversations that I'm trying to, take what I'm hearing and take back, I'm trying to think about how we can, one, sort of structure and schedule our public meeting time over the coming year to be actually a meaningful vehicle for building the sorts of relationship with EJ focused populations that this group is intending to hold. So that's just one piece that is of some interest of feedback on. And the other piece that I think is really crucial is that, I spoke with our business office, as was asked at the last meeting, about allowable uses. Just a reminder to everyone that we do have $150,000 right now sort of available to support community engagement work. So as we're having this dialogue, there are one-time resources at the table to support you all as a council and what your vision is and what you want to see happen. However, because that is money that is in, state and our agency's budget, we have restrictions around what we can spend that money on, especially when it comes to direct compensation for any sort of community engagement. But even buying, paying for childcare gets sticky, paying for any sort of raffles or prizes. So I just would like us to maybe think about, as we're envisioning what we want engagement to entail and look at, the sooner we can sort of scope out what we might want community partners at the table in a contracting role as, the sooner we can figure that out. It's going to take a solid 3 to 6 months to sort of actually get that on board. So that's just another sort of specific outcome that Carla and I are really trying to wrap our minds around, so that we can think about how those funds actually help get those funds deployed in the way that we want to see happen. Yeah, so let's take a minute with the scheduling and the deadlines, just because I know there are folks in the room here who weren't at our last joint meeting. So what we talked about in the last meeting for the deliverables themselves was an across the board ask of the legislature for a 2-year extension on all of the deliverables, but sort of maintaining the ability of the advisory council and the interagency committee to set some interim deliverable expectations within that 2-year extension. And what that 2 years represents effectively is accounting for the 6 months of delay we already sort of experienced this year. So everything is behind because it took us about 6 months to hire EJ coordinators, to get all advisory councils onboarded, to get and to get authorization to make per diem payments. So that sort of ate up a big chunk of time. We're also recognizing that there's about 6 months still of front end work that is needed, just like putting together the contract I just described, to really get our operations up and running and figure it out and, sort of on track in a supported way, getting you all as advisory council members supported in a good way. And then just recognizing that all of these due dates were fairly ambitious to begin with, especially if we're trying to set up mechanisms for meaningful community participation along each step of the way and taking the time to do that well. So that was sort of like an extra year in general, just to take a little longer on the work itself, to do it in a more quality way, recognizing just how resources intensive and slow moving, trying to get these things done as we're state government, that's just a reality that we're contending with. And thank you, Carla, for dropping in the materials from last week. So in those materials, that facilitator PowerPoint, you can find what it looks like time-wise across the 2 years, some notes about things that mattered. What I will say is that even if we were to get a 2-month or 2-year extension, that I'm still coming to this meeting today wanting to recognize that we have one deliverable that is, its next step is public input, right? So we have our draft principles of the draft core principles of community engagement. As soon as those go to state agencies, that'll sort of initiate their strategic planning process to write their own agency plans. So the only next step in that process is to kind of collectively envision what we want our public comment to what we want that 45-day public comment period to look like. And there's nothing that stops us, even with an extension on the due dates, from trying to figure out what we want that to look like and move it forward. So just want to acknowledge the extension doesn't mean that the work really slows down or that there isn't sort of pressing things to do in terms of thinking about what we want community engagement to look like. So that's all the context I have that feels relevant. I'm going to stop. And yeah, I see that Carla dropped in just sort of names for circle process. So if we want to just keep holding that order and just get responses of how we're feeling about that piece of our work, floor is open. Stop there. And so I guess
Sorry, Phoebes, can you ask your question again? I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, I think I heard an ask from Jennifer just that we could have a moment to sort of reflect on whether we support that approach. We need to sort of finalize that decision as a group. And so wanted to just give folks a chance, if you want to reflect on your feeling about that approach, that's welcome. And to the extent that you want to bring up anything around how this feels like it relate, how the deadlines might affect how we approach community engagement, welcome to share that as well.
And then just, can you re-clarify what the approach is? I apologize because I had to take a call. But I see I'm up first. Or I can even just pass and then
yeah,
get
why
a
don't we
sense
pass
as to
and then go
everyone goes.
around, and then I can find a way to pull up and share with you more easily what
Great.
give some context to what we're talking about, which is just sort of extending all the due dates out. So yeah, Jennifer, do you want to go next?
It looks like Jennifer also had to take a quick phone call, and I'd be happy to just say a couple of things and then pass on. But I'm looking at one of the slides from last week that says the additional time would allow for better laying of the groundwork, doing the preparatory work, doing the work well, and really engaging with folks and being adaptable as we pursue the work. And as I look at those three reasons, and I think about what Susanna said about making sure that we tell this process on behalf of the people that we're trying to do the process for what we need to do it well. So Phoebes, I don't know if you need us to not take a vote or something like that. I don't think that's what you're saying, but in terms of signaling support for that ask, I really think it's really important. Actually, there's too many processes that are rushed, and there's so many other efforts going on right now that we should be seeking to understand and build mutual processes across the populations that we're trying to work with on Land Access Opportunity Board, on this, on the biodiversity initiative that the legislature's asked for. I think it'd be really thoughtful to slow down a little bit and connect all those dots for people so that their time is really well spent and they understand how much state government is able to do and willing to do and where it's happening. So we'll let it go at that for now, but really glad that we're talking about this today.
Thanks, Trey. Really appreciate having the opportunity to hear your thoughts on it. And yeah, we're not making a final decision today, but I think Jennifer rightly noted there are folks in the room who weren't in the meeting where we did talk about this last. So I'm glad that we're having a chance to do it while you're here. Sana?
Yeah, I think the phrase out of what Trey said that I want to lift up is drawing those connections for people, because it is easy for us to say, oh no, this is 19 different working groups on the same topic, but here's how they're different. We know because we've been tracking them through bills and because we sit on them, but it is overwhelming for people out of government, even people in government, to understand how these things connect, whether these things connect, and why the hell they should care. Because they get survey fatigue and engagement fatigue, right? Because the state of Vermont came to my community 2 weeks ago to talk about traffic stops. And now they're coming to my community in a week to talk about housing. And now they're talking about blah. And maybe those things are related, maybe they're not. But I do really appreciate the idea of being able to say, here is the ecosystem of everything that's being worked on. And I think it's also good just because a lot of times people say, oh, the state government workers, they don't do anything. They just, go to meetings all day and like they're not doing anything. And I know we're doing stuff. But if we're not communicating it effectively to the members of the public, then they don't know how it impacts their day-to-day lives, and then don't know it's not about what their opinion is. It's about not knowing they have the opportunity to share an opinion in the first place. So yeah, I also want to recognize that I could completely flip this on its head and say, listen, we hear from communities all the time that we're just kicking a can down the road, and why do we keep delaying? And every time we ask for extensions or new working groups, that we're not addressing the actual problem and we're just perpetuating the sort of meeting cycle. And so I also want to acknowledge that there's definite downsides in the public eye to a delay. And sometimes for us, what feels thoughtful and generous feels like apathy to people who are experiencing the harms on the ground now. So I guess I could kind of go either way with it, because I just want to recognize that both of those things are things that we hear from the public. And I don't think there is one right answer. It's just really difficult to honor both of those perspectives at the same time. Like, we often get told, you did this process too quickly. And then some other people will say, you did it too slowly, like you needed to act faster. And so recognizing that we're never going to be able to please everybody, I at least wanted to make sure that those two tension points were called.
Thank you, Susanna. Really appreciate that. Gail, chime in on this piece, or again, you're welcome to use the chat, or you're welcome to pass.
I totally support slowing it down and making sure that it's thorough. And we lost that 6 months, and hopefully there's guardrails that we don't procrastinate because we might get the extra time. But I think that it's really important that the work is not rushed.
Thank you. Brittany, now with a little more context, you anything you want to add to the conversation?
Yeah, so I agree with wanting to ensure we're going, like, our pace meets the needs of the majority. Recognizing, like Susanna's point, that we're not going to please everyone. I also feel like with, we have an opportunity, and maybe this is part of the consideration around what, like mapping out how we're moving ahead. And I know that's part of, the intent in this work. And maybe there are ways to be doing like some kind of like concurrent effort to meet the needs of, the varying like Vermonters with the varying needs of, pace needs, I should say. So I think, yeah, for me, if there's opportunities and how we're laying out our opportunities in terms of what our engagement can look like, or, being, I guess, just offering like different opportunities. So apologize because I feel like I'm sounding a bit scrambled, but I'm thinking like if you have, say, for instance, there's public comments, or there's opportunities to meet maybe with you, Phoebes, or there's we have this process, and I think that part of that in terms of what the intent is that we're setting, and if we're setting it in a way where we're thinking ahead and we're considering these different groups, I think can be really powerful. So thanks.
Thanks, Brittany. Yeah, I appreciate fresh in the conversation, and agree that there is room. We talked a little bit in the last meeting about interim opportunities and things like that, that can be happening simultaneously. That an extension doesn't mean there's not work that we can be doing right now to try to sort of mitigate and improve some of the issues going on. So appreciate that. Jennifer, I see you're back. And tell us what's most helpful for you. We just kind of went around in reactions from folks in general. The tension point's been named, right? Like, we don't want to delay life-saving work, and like that we are responsible for, and we care very much about process and integrity in that process. And so, yeah, the floor is yours if you want to jump in.
Sure. I mean, I have just a couple things that kind of concern me. I like the blanket, just push it back 2 years, kind of concerns me. I think that we could maybe go through and a couple of these, maybe keep, a closer deadline, not extend it all the way out. That's sort of my like basic reaction. I think, why would we wait on putting out our core principles of community engagement? Of course, we can take what we have even further, maybe, but these agencies are doing community engagement now, and they need some guidance, and we have some guidance. So let's continue to move forward with putting out that guidance, would be my thought. And then, as I said in the last meeting, but for the benefit of anyone here, the spending guidance, the law intended to capture spending. It's a 3-year look back. It intended to capture the year 2020. So I think that we should move forward trying to capture those 3 years that the law intended. So that, again, I think that it's just guidance. So moving forward to putting that guidance out, maybe in 2024, 2025, it's so far away to me to be pushing these like preliminary first steps out. I think that we could maybe just extend that for a year. Some of these other ones, you know, I'm definitely in favor of moving some of these targets out to allow us to be more collaborative.
Thanks, Jennifer. Yeah, so I think one of the a key thing I have heard back both in meetings and in the follow-up survey, we support this across the board extension if, you know, to give a sort of statutory breathing room if we are empowered to set interim due dates. So that feels like a very clear, consistent ask across the board of both interagency committee and advisory council members. And I agree, you know, like these next slides are sort of like were my brainstorm of like, well, all right, you know, just because it's 2 years across the board, we don't need to wait a whole nother year to put out the principles you already drafted. We just need to do our 45-day public comment period and put that out the door. So, you know, this, I would like, regardless, it's sort of, I guess it's the degree to which there is trust, you know, and openness to that sort of dual pathway. We're sort of giving ourselves like the path of least statutory resistance in some ways to be flexible and to move the work forward, but are sort of committing ourselves to interim processes that keep ourselves on track at a natural pace that honors that there's work to do right now continuously, and that would keep the covered agencies on track on the sort of timeline that we're looking for as well. And I really do feel strongly that the covered agencies, they're almost like, my sense is they're sort of like, we know we need to do this. What do you want us to do? And I think they're going to be operating more from the sort of cues of, here's the guidance we release. There will be a webinar in 1 week from the EJ coordinator to walk your agency through the expectations of this guidance. There will be this, technical assistance opportunity, strategic, I think there's ways we can sort of pathway and support our work through. But that's just from like a coordination perspective, what we've been talking about. So, and Carla, I welcome you to just give more context, because I know you're sort of seeing this through on the statutory side as well. So I guess, the feedback question, the question for the group is, do we trust that sort of interim due date setting process for ourselves, that we can empower ourselves to do that? I would put out guidance to the covered agencies, sort of clarifying that that's how and when they should expect to hear about upcoming due dates. And we would move forward from that place, versus trying to change each individual due date statutorily and go through that process in the law, through the law itself. I think that's sort of like the big question in the room. Do we trust that we can be empowered to set reasonable interim due dates? And I was thinking it'd be good for us to try and actually map that out and maybe make a commitment around that. At least look at a preliminary proposal for that at our December 18th meeting, and try to use some of that time to do that as a group when we're next all together. So I'll stop there and reopen to the circle, and or Carla, if you want to give more background context.
Thank you, Phoebes. I think you've done a wonderful job in contextualizing the question. I think that's the question before the group, based on the feedback that we've gathered from the surveys that were filled out after our joint meeting. So yeah, I invite more conversation about that particular question.
Great. So I'll open up the floor. If anyone wants to start, then we can go through our circle process too. But we don't have to. We can start for whoever in the circle wants to go first. Gail, go for it.
Well, my question is that the fiscal part of it from 2020 to 23, can you explain that a little bit better? Because that seems to be your concern this time and the last time you spoke about it.
Jennifer, do you want to speak to that directly? I can summarize my understanding as well, but about just the concern with the benefit spending guidance.
Yeah, well, I'm sure you can do a good job, Summer. I just basically the first one that, well, not really the first task, but one of the first tasks here was to develop this guidance document that would go to the agencies to tell them about, or to give them guidance on how to do this report, where they were going to look back over the last 3 years and pull all the data they can, whether it's like geospatially, like they know where the money was spent, or demographically, like who received the money or the benefits from their money, to try to do that first step of like even get the data on how the state spends money on quote unquote environmental benefits. And so we are supposed to put out this guidance document. And Phoebes, is there something to share? There's been a lot of work done to like start to develop that, but it's not in any kind of state yet to be an actual guidance document. But the idea is that that initial document was going to tell them, how are you going to look back over the last 3 years? And then the law says from then on, annually, each agency is going to produce a similar report that's outlining where they spent their money on environmental benefits and who received the benefit. So the first step is to look back, and then they're going to start doing that every single year. And I guess the main point is the look back is for the 3 years. And I think getting the data on how the money was spent during the pandemic is really important, because there was a lot of money spent, and all the ARPA money and everything like that. So it would be very interesting to get that data, and really important, I think, to see where it all went, if possible.
I think there might be a legal aspect to this question, which is the read of the law. So the law, in terms of what 3 years we're talking about, because arguably like I just dropped in the chat, sort of the opening to that part of the law, which is a charge to review the past 3 years, which I would, so the question is the interpretation, the past 3 years as of the law passing, or the past 3 years as of the guidance being submitted, and right, that we write the guidance. So I think I could bring this back to Rachel and ask that clarifying question. My sense is that it would be totally reasonable to say we would like data from these 3 years to establish our 3-year look back, even if it took us a little while to get that guidance on how to do it out. And quite frankly, there's no way to get immediate 1-year data. There's going to be a lag anyway. So even if this guidance doesn't go out until 2024, early 2025, I think 2020 would still very reasonably be in the look back year, just because of the lag of when we could even ask for data from a look back period. But yeah, I see Susanna's hand up. If you want to jump in, go for it.
I think someone else has a hand before me.
Okay, Gail, yeah, I know we're still responding to your question, but this is helpful
Oh,
to clarify.
This is actually a very helpful conversation, because I was not aware of we were following this bill, but not at the technical level that we're talking about it right now. For our office, it was more about conceptually with equity. And so this question about the look back timing is a curious one. If I'm just looking at the text of what you put in the chat, if I'm only looking at that, to me, I'm reading that as the 3 years prior to the guidance being issued, is what I think. However, I also want to agree very strongly with the statement that I want to know where this COVID money went, because there was tons of it flying around and people were making all kinds of justifications to the government about what was a good use. And I want to see what happened with that. 2020 was a year of chaos, period, end of story. And so I don't know, maybe not a lot of it moved because people were still figuring out what to do with it. I don't know, but those are my thoughts for now.
Did Phoebes freeze? Phoebes? I believe perhaps they did. Can folks hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, Phoebes left the meeting. So let's just give them a few minutes to join again the meeting. Are there any reactions to the conversation and Susana's comment? Trey?
I guess I will vocalize that it makes sense to posture this question or to pose this question in such a way that doesn't disinclude that data. I think two people have already said that. I want to echo that seems really important. I also wanted to, looking back just prior to that in the dialogue, say that what makes the delay make sense to me is the ability to have interim deadlines, and I hope we can continue to be flexible with them too, so that we could, if other priorities or if there's other things that we should be doing that need to be interim deliverables as part of our public outreach process, that we were able to use the time to make it work better for the public. And I appreciated, Susanna, the way that you said that. And I also appreciate that we don't want people to think that we don't see immediate needs. So if immediate needs and other priorities for communication of emergency services that are available, or response services that are available to the populations on the issues that are environmental justice issues, like mold in housing or asbestos in housing or things like that, if we're doing outreach and we're trying to do it really well and make it meaningful to people, let's think of how that toolkit can be expanded to connect people with services if that's possible.
Thank you, Trey. And you've captured with your comment and echoing Susana's initial feedback, one of the reasons why the proposal is on the table to recalibrate the deadlines is really ensuring that while we do the work, we're meaningfully engaging and responding to the concerns that get raised while we do the engagement with community members, and also ensure that in the delivery of the things that we should do as agencies, that we are capturing the sentiment from the advisory council members that sit within the board, within the council. And we have not yet set up structures to do that efficiently and effectively. And so the concern is that we have been missing important feedback and content just because we have not had the opportunity to set up those structures given the deadlines that we had to meet statutorily. So I appreciate both your comments and actually the identification of concrete examples and that would actually be relevant for this conversation. Yes, additionally, in order for the Interagency Council and ANR specifically as a technical support provider for the implementation of this law, is ensuring that the Advisory Council is prepared to provide the advice that they're meant to provide for certain deliverables. And so one such example is the civil rights and environmental justice reporting and the definition of environmental justice focused population, ensuring that the Advisory Council feels equipped to provide such advice is of the utmost importance. And so, in an attempt to provide that support with an initial presentation prepared by support staff from the Department of Environmental Conservation, specifically on environmental justice population, the feedback that we got is more work needs to be done with regards to how this data is presented so that the Advisory Council can actually perform their duties effectively. And that takes time. And given how, the deadlines are set up, we just really would have to miss another deadline in order to be able to do that. And so those are some of the considerations that are on the table. It's an external facing, community engagement process that the agency can provide, the unlocking of funds to do that and support that engagement, but also internally for agency staff is how to effectively support advisory council members and provide the content and information that's needed for those duties to be performed. And so those are some of the factors, and also, the under capacity. I think it's become evident that it's a lot of work, and the support internally in terms of capacity does not allow to move at the speed that the deadlines were set up. And so feedback from the advisory council member is just fundamental to come up with an approach that resonates with both groups and also external stakeholders. Any other comments or thoughts with regards to this particular item? I'll go around the circle process order one more time, just to ensure that all voices are heard. If you don't have anything to add, feel comfortable just passing. Brittany?
Yeah, I have nothing else to add. Thank you.
Jennifer?
I guess I'm a little bit unclear. Like, I'd love to see a summary of what and get to the point of like how are we going to make a decision around this. So maybe that's next time, but yeah, I think I'm still of the mind that there are certain deadlines that pushing them 2 years out is a little bit unnecessary and almost kind of creates this perception like we haven't done anything or aren't doing anything. So still hopeful that a couple of these maybe should remain or be pushed out a year and not 2 years.
Thank you, Jennifer. Trey?
I'll pass now.
Thank you, Trey. Susanna?
I think I also am going to pass. I'm not sure that I have something to add, but I do still feel kind of unsettled about balancing all of this. So, yeah.
Thank you, Susanna. Gail?
I'm going to pass.
Okay, thank you, Gail. I think next steps for this particular item is following up with, after we meet with the rest of the advisory council members on Wednesday, based on feedback gathered today, and then just present to the advisory council as a whole a document that outlines the options before us, and then through and I'm trying to think about the meeting cap and quorum, through consensus, determine what the approach will be to address this aspect of the work. Does that seem reasonable? Yes.
Yes.
Trey, Susanna, Gail,
Yes.
Jennifer, Brittany.
Yes.
Okay, so then I'll just make sure to let FIPS know about our next steps with regards to the 2-year recalibration. Okay. So then I think we can go back to our draft agenda. I mean, not the draft agenda, our agenda, which was approved and will become the final agenda. So we had community engagement, and that as part of that conversation, we spoke about the recalibration. Then we have as well an item on, oh, and I do want to identify that it's 2:05, and we had marked 2 p.m. as a period for public comment. So I would like to open the floor for members of the public. If there are any comments, feedback with regards to the topics that we're covering here.
Yeah, I don't have any comment to that.
Okay. And are there any other members of the public present? No, and I see that Phoebe's joined.
Hi, everyone.
And-
I'm sorry.
So Phoebe's, I realized that it was 2:05 and that we had identified 2 p.m. as a moment for public comment. So I opened the floor a few minutes ago for members of the public, should any had any feedback or comments. None. I think the only member of the public is Dale. So they don't have any comments. So then I was going to go back to our agenda. So basically, the next steps with regards to the 2-year recalibration is we're going to touch base on Wednesday with the rest of advisory council members, and then we'll circulate back to the group as a whole what the options are, so that then we can identify a process for making a decision on how we're going to approach this as a collective.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It's just my relationship with technology is challenged. I'm so sorry. Like, of course, you've been good for weeks and weeks and weeks. I'm at the local library. I'll be solid for the rest of the meeting. Thank you for rolling with that, Carla. I appreciate you. Okay, great. Well, glad to hear that there was next steps identified for this conversation, and I'm glad that we had a chance to touch base with this smaller group. It was really helpful to get like more in depth on this topic and think through some of the, how we want to find the middle ground here. So I guess it's a good chance to maybe then re-anchor into the agenda, and around these two sort of related questions of how does this council want to be set up and supported, and sort of scope out its work around being a bridge to ensure the voices of directly impacted environmental justice focused populations are informing our work as we implement this law, and how do we do that in a way that we are creating empowered relationships with the state agencies, so that the engagement doesn't feel like an exercise in just hearing the same issues over and over again, which tends to happen a lot in our community outreach and engagement, but not having meaningful mechanisms to take that information and sort of work with state agencies to shift and change the policies, procedures, and guidelines that lead to those sorts of outcomes, which is just, it's technical, slow work, but that's what the law sort of asks for. And I think when I read the law, the more I read it, it's sort of, giving us some setting some expectations up front, some guidance up front, getting some data up front, but ultimately a lot of the work is, okay, this year you said that 20% of funding went to EJ focused populations. How do we move the needle to 25%, to 30%? Which benefits? Are we defining the right benefits, right? So there's just sort of this iterative nature to which implementing environmental justice is just an ongoing complex policy process. So yeah, I think I would, and I think we could take this conversation from, it's easy, I think, to get, really theoretical in the conversation. I think our core principles do a nice job of sort of laying that out for us of what we all agree is sort of important in engagement practices. So I'd love to sort of try to anchor into the tangible and the concrete, you know, and to the extent it's helpful, I think it'd be good to hear from everyone, you know, what you need to do that. You know, I'm just thinking, for example, again, the public and the core principles for community engagement. The next step in our process is to put it through a 45-day public input period. So just defining the parameters of what we think that should look like would be, I think, a generative exercise, you know, and potentially thinking about sort of what we want community engagement to look like. But I really welcome, you know, different ways. I really welcome whatever entry point into the conversation feels alive for the 5 of you here. So maybe we could start there, just sort of go around again and sort of circle process and just identify sort of what is the top of mind thing for you as you think about your role as an advisory council that you would like us to sort of nail down, figure out, clarify, work toward tangibly. If we could just sort of go around and, yeah, just what is sort of your, actually, what I'd love for us to do is go around and both name our role on the advisory council in a little more depth, because I think that'll give some context to what we're bringing to the conversation. And then, you know, sort of in that context, what is top of mind for you right now? And I had a specific prompt that I wrote down. Let me pull it back up here. Sorry, I'm sort of getting reoriented. My little cramped workspace in my truck right now. Here we go. So I'm just going to drop in the chat just part 1 of this prompt around community engagement, which really is sort of, you know, what stakeholder group do you represent as an advisory council member? You know, and just anything around what, you know, how you see that group existing in Vermont. You know, what are some of the networks, some of the groups that you think of when you name that, or what does that organization do if you represent an organization? And but also, like, is there anything else experience-wise or connection-wise that you're bringing to the table in terms of communities you're thinking about reaching? Because I think it's important for us to actually be on the same page about what we mean when we say we're engaging community. We each come to the table kind of with a different role in that. So yeah, so if we can go around, name what community we are charged, what communities we see ourselves as charged or empowered or able to engage. And sort of like one or two things that feel sort of top of mind for you, that you want to see happening in the short term to move engagement forward. So sorry, that was a long-winded prompt, but does anybody feel up to going first in that? And we can go around.
I think I can answer it. So I am a member of the advisory council and the interagency working group. And I'm not 100% sure. I think I'm named to it by statute, and I think that's the relationship I have to the group. But as a representative of the Office of Racial Equity, because I'm the director of racial equity, and so for me, I am usually statutorily required to bring the racial equity lens, and so yeah, I'm here thinking about particularly communities of color who are disproportionately found in areas that have been subjected to ecological disinvestment or neglect or harm, and are also the least likely to be in a socioeconomic position where they can do anything about it. So that's kind of what I'm bringing. And in terms of, oh, you already put it in the prompt. I guess I was going to say, in terms of ways that we can reach communities through the work, I just would want us to keep in mind that if we're solely focused on English speakers, then we're missing a big part of the catchment areas.
Thank you, Susanna. Really helpful.
I can jump in. So I am the social justice rep, and work with groups like the Environmental Justice Network, the Rutland Area NAACP, Let's Grow Kids, and probably others that I'm not thinking of right now, but those are like the main ones. And so I think for me, when I think about the group of Vermonters that I work with and for, it's really important to me that there's like in how we move this process forward, that there's this accountability and transparency in how we're moving forward. And it's so like as detailed as we can be in what we're hoping to accomplish and what the next steps are, so that when we are seeking input, that Vermonters are having like the clearest picture and into what we're doing. I will also say I'm gonna probably have to hop off here soon because my work stuff is kind of blowing up right now. So, but I wanted to at least be able to share that. Thanks.
Thanks, Brittany. Yeah, Gail, go for it.
So I'm on the Environmental Justice Committee, and I am a resident of a mobile home park. I don't work for any agencies, and my role here was just to represent mobile home parks. And I don't have any training in this, and what I tried to do is reach out. There's over 200 mobile home parks in Vermont, and my feeling is that they have always been underserved and ignored. And what I've been attempting to do is to reach out to those mobile home parks and just let them know that they have a voice. So I started out sending surveys. I've sent out about 50 and I've gotten 4 returns since probably January, which is not unusual. I'm on a board and I know people don't engage that easily, but it becomes a little frustrating because here's an opportunity that we're given to have a voice, and you can't just keep bitching and moaning that you're underserved and not heard if you don't step up. And I'm usually a really positive person, but it's so frustrating because what I hear is that the government doesn't care about us, or what are they going to do with the information? They're very hesitant when it has, and Thebes had said it to me in an email the other day, people are so untrusting of anything having to do with government. I don't know how to break through those barriers. You know, all I can say is I'm a resident. I get it, you know, and I know that most of the mobile homes are underserved and they're a municipal desert. So they're not even getting the same municipal services as someone else that lives in the town. So I feel kind of at a loss, and I don't feel very equipped to be able to present anything that we're doing on the council if I can't get people to engage and I don't know how to engage them.
Thanks,
That's it.
Gail.
Gail, thanks for saying that.
Yeah, lots of thoughts popping up, but let's keep going because I think other folks probably do too. And let's just let the conversation go where it goes. Trey or Jennifer? Yeah, in terms of this prompt. Yeah, go for it, Trey.
To jump in, and maybe I'll take the 2 prompts backwards because that was a lot. It's a full portion, Gail, of what you brought to the conversation to think about. And so for me, a short-term engagement goal would need to be figuring out how to engage with communities, with environmental justice communities where the sense of urgency is felt. You know, that we can demonstrate that, you know, in an engagement process, that we hear the sense of urgency, and that we bring sort of, like I was saying before, what can we bring that helps people understand that's immediately available, even before we finish doing this work, what are ways that we can point people to services and resources in a way that's going to be helpful. It's going to be heard. It's going to be translated if it needs to be. It's going to be written in ways. Susanna, I've heard you speak about this before, but translating legalese into ways that people can understand, this. So reformatting it, repackaging the informatics of it. I think that's where, again, if we're slowing down to do good work, I don't care when we give a deadline to the legislature on a report. I'd like to use the interim goals to see how we can help people, and then I think we'll hear them much better. So I'm here from VHCB, which means I think mostly we're connected to the folks around the state who operate affordable housing and shelters. So that's the population that we're most connected to, that I think people will think of as part of the environmental justice work. We're also engaged in how to prioritize spending. We're not the only ones, but we're in the conversation around prioritizing spending for community resilience and biodiversity and conservation. So how we decide to spend those dollars is a really important other element that VHCB brings to the table. And then for those who don't know, before I was at VHCB, I was at Let's Grow Kids. And before that, I was in state government and in private law, always doing coalition building and strategies for how to pull groups towards outcomes. And so that's why, that's why I asked Gus, our director, if I could be the designee on this, because I wanted to help connect those dots and help, VHCB is poised to help do that as well.
Great. Thanks, Trey. Jennifer.
Well, the conservation districts are local units of government. So we're technically municipalities. We're this really interesting subdivision of state government. And we are governed by an elected board of 5 supervisors. And so we really are like a public entity whose job it is to do public engagement around natural resource decision making, funding distribution. We coordinate funding from like state, federal, private money and try to get it out the door. It's different depending on what conservation district, because we're all run like separate entities because we are. And so there's a lot of stuff we do really well, and there's a lot of stuff we could do better, a lot better. And we are supposed to serve all occupiers of land in our district. Some of the language in our statute is around landowners, and that might change this year. We have like evaluated other state statutes, and a lot of them take that landowner language out. In a lot of ways, it's unconstitutional to only have landowners be eligible to vote. So that language like that just has to change. But we are actually supposed to serve everyone. And yeah, I think in terms of who we are able to connect with, definitely farmers of all sizes. We have like a special like funding pools for what they deem historically underserved farmers. So we definitely do quite a good deal of outreach to historically underserved individuals in the farming space. And ever expanding in terms of our non-agricultural work. We connect directly with towns and around stormwater infrastructure and like culvert design, plantings to reduce the impact of storms. So that's the kind of stuff where it's it would be great to have a better understanding and prioritization around like who is receiving these benefits. What is top of mind engagement goal? Yeah, I mean, in terms of how we do our engagement, we have this really powerful actually process of federal money creation that we can do at a local level through our local funding pools. And so it's sort of like up up to us to design how it all works, but I'm going to put a link in the chat that describes and links to all the federal guidance documents on these local funding pools, because that's where we're at, is promoting these funding pool creation as widely as possible, and bringing as many community members into the process as possible to get their priorities paid for.
Go for it, Susanna.
Can I ask Jennifer a clarifying question? When you first introduced your org, you said you are meant to serve all occupiers of land. And is that language that appears anywhere? Is that kind of how you informally describe it?
Yeah, it's very much in writing.
Okay.
And I will share a couple things in the chat about that. So I'm referring to the Soil Conservation Act, the Vermont State Soil Conservation Act when I say that. So I'm going to share a few things in the chat that you can.
Thank you, because the first thing that came to my mind when you said that was how specifically worded it. Again, it's very clear that those words were very carefully chosen. And I wonder if anyone has yet, and I'm sure the answer is yes, tried to make the argument that that also includes flora and or fauna in an area as occupiers of land.
Like, where are you going with that?
I had the same thought.
Cool. We also, the statute uses 3 different words. It uses residents, it uses land occupiers, and it uses landowners. And the link I put in the chat is to our, we're doing a survey of all 57 states and territories, conservation district statutes. And that's the column that's most interesting to me, is Vermont is like in a very small group that still uses landowner at all. We're in the same group as like Mississippi and Arkansas and Vermont. So other people use electors, others use residents, like I said. We're very much in favor of occupier, which was in the original language from 1938. But I don't know, to answer your question about the natural environment. I like that thinking.
Go for it.
I'm not sure how far it's gone, but there have been that Susanna, the bridge that you built from that, Jennifer, is certainly there are a number of different legal theories and work being done all around the world to name the biosphere as having rights. And there, you know, there've been the Montana, was it Montana, the decision that the you know, group of students brought, that where they were trying to project their future rights. So there are a number of different legal theories, and mostly they're interested in how to appropriately, I think, move money forward to address concerns that are going to occur later for the biosphere, for our grandchildren who aren't born yet, you know, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it would be, I don't know whether this is something that will be helpful as we go, but, you know, a side project could be to begin to collect the legal theories that are out there that have to do with, you know, whether that's reparations payments that have been made successfully, or cases that have been made, or cases that are, you know, seeking that wrong profit benefit and moving that money forward somehow to pay for justice measures that could happen now that are going to save those injustices from happening later.
Yeah, and I know Rich has brought this up in some prior meetings as well. So this definitely is full circle to this group, and you know, raises for me sort of a question that's been in my mind, which is that the scope of policy issues that fall under the environmental justice umbrella are vast. And you know, to what extent does this council, based on your already existing knowledge of priority issues and things like that, you know, how do we approach sort of taking on this body of work in a way that we can get into the specific details of policy questions along the way, with some, you know, and it'll require some choice, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. Like, you know, to think that this council will be able to get into the inner workings and policy making decision around everything from food access to agricultural practices to housing to rights of nature, it could be true. This body is meant to last forever, but is also something that needs to be prioritized and thought through. And to me, that's sort of part of that second part of this agenda of, when we say we want to be infiltrating and influencing policymaking in more meaningful ways, you all are the first step. Like, to me, getting you all in the door to do that is sort of a first step that then opens up doors for other community members to be part of that as well. And I think the structure and the prioritization of that's important. What would it look like to ask the question of what do environmental justice burdens and benefits look like in the housing realm, and just live with that question for 1 year as a group, and intentionally have our meetings hosted at Department of Housing or at VHCB or at places where those policymakers are, bring people in. So I'm really interested in sort of the structure of our meetings and our approaches to be able to spend time with that. And the other thing I'm recognizing with this advisory council is that, there are folks, I'm just thinking like Gail, how can we team up with each other? It sounds like Trey, you might have resources through what you already do at VHCB to maybe help Gail, who's stepping into this role without any institutional support around her the same way, to meet our shared goals as advisory counselors and to sort of sync those things up. Because Gail, I think is in no way a reflection on you, or even a reflection on the community you're trying to reach, that the response rates are so low. The burden of completing a survey that goes into a void with no knowledge of what that information is going to lead to Brittany's earlier point, like, folks have been there for many years, and I think regardless of how well qualified you are, like how well you're doing as a representative, if you're not empowered to be able to tell folks where that information is going and to say, I can offer a stipend for you, here's a gift card we can do for survey. I think there's just institutional support that if we don't wrap it around you, and any advisory council member will probably start to struggle with that if they're not already in an organizational structure to support some of that effort. So I just really want to acknowledge that, and that I think you're bringing to the table exactly the sort of challenges we need brought to the table. And that's a huge part. That's as valuable to me as you saying, as you bringing survey results at this stage of our work. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. I see Jennifer, your hand up. Go for it. Yeah.
Yeah, it reminded me of really the other priority in terms of community engagement. You mentioned like there are challenges to spending money on stipends and childcare, et cetera, et cetera. But I think we need to grapple with those challenges and figure out how to spend this money that's been allocated. I know that it's been allocated specifically to like around the development of this tool, but literally everything we're doing from here on out is going to lead to information that will develop the Vermont EJ advisory tool or the EJ mapping tool. So I definitely think no matter what, we can be gathering data around the tool at these meetings or to inform the development. I guess where I'm just sort of questioning, like, I was on a team that was contracted by the DEC, the Department of Environmental Conservation, so under ANR, that paid stipends and paid for childcare and paid, for food, and held community meetings where folks were compensated for their time. I guess there's been that work has been done kind of over and over again throughout these agencies. So now it's sort of like, what is the takeaway from the agencies from all these community engagement contracts that they've already done? Can they tell us, yes, we can do this. No, we can't do this. This is how we can build this into our system. I would love that kind of reflection from like DOT, DEC, anyone else who's done this work and paid stipends. And if it has to go through a contractor, then I guess it has to go through a contractor. So yeah, I'm curious about that.
Yeah, so a couple of thoughts. One, I do think it's our responsibility to not to say, oh, it's the barrier, this is the only way to pay people. Like, I think it makes sense to take that on as a policy issue and work that out agency by agency, which then takes me to questions of how do you all, or that's the wrong question. How do we want to have the community engagement plan writing process, which is the next step after the principles are released, be an exercise and doing what you just described, for example, right? Of actually having agencies sort of take stock of what they're doing and what they're able to do and move forward, you know, with addressing those barriers and things. I don't know that I have, and you know, I will keep working at it. I'm also fresh and new and figuring this all out as I go, but like a clear solution for us in the, like, to me, even though it takes a minute to get that contract online, it still feels like the most accessible solution to direct payments for community input and things like that. So I just, you know, I'll just name, I feel a little like kind of little quandary in that of just trying to think through what the right next step would be. You know, while honoring that the long-term goal should be like getting rid of those barriers. I'm curious if there's resistance at this point to trying to have an RFP to spend some of the $150,000 currently allocated. And to your point, Jennifer, if we feel like that leaves 350,000. So just, sorry, a step back. There's $500,000 one-time funding for the law to get going. We do not have recurring base budget funds aside from the EJ coordinator positions. That is built in base budget A&R. But the rest of it's one-time funding. And of the $500,000, we sort of made an internal call to sort of hold $350,000 to start doing a contract and development of the EJ mapping tool, and hold another $150,000 to do community engagement. That, to Jennifer's point, will inform the community mapping tool, but other things as well. And, you know, I think we know, so there's some flexibility. That was sort of an internal determination, but that's where that number comes from. We haven't really spent any of that 150,000 yet. So that is, it's all there still. It'll just get carried over for us to use. So when we're thinking about using that funding, you know, we at A&R right now can do things with it. You know, plan events, pay for events, get folks together, public, you know, put materials together, printing and things like that. But we really would need to go through a competitive bidding process for, but we cannot pay stipends. That's sort of the holdup right now. And we would need to, you know, still do some bidding for some of the other things as well. Even like, you know, thinking about
Clarity.
Yeah.
Point of clarity. What do you mean you can't pay stipends?
What I mean is that we cannot directly pay, like cut a check or purchase a gift card or other compensation form for an individual to be in a room consulting or advising unless we've sort of built a contract for that to be happening through a community organization. So and forgive me, like I don't know exactly like what statute that ties to or where that holdup lives, but like A&R's internal business processes, like there is no vehicle, as far as I know, to literally hand somebody cash and or a check and or for just showing up at a meeting, a one-time thing. And if somebody else knows more than I do on that, welcome to jump in. But
Yes, Jennifer, it's not that we cannot do it, is that in order for us to be able to use that allocation for that purpose, we would need to enter into some sort of agreement with an intermediary. So that would be the avenue by which we could actually utilize that and implement one of the recommendations that came out of the Department of Environmental Conservation Community Report, which was the liaison model for engaging with community members. So then that's one of the questions and decisions that we have to make as a body is if we are moving forward, if the preferred approach is the identification of liaisons from communities that are represented in this body, then the avenue by which we can do that is by entering into a contract. So we would have to do like the RFP and all of that, and that takes about 6 months more or less. But that's where feedback from advisory council members regarding knowledge that you possess with regards to what is the best approach to tap into the members that I represent. What would that look like? Is it this liaison mechanism? Is it any other mechanism, so that internally we can start structuring and thinking through what kind of RFP we would need and what kind of agreement we would need to facilitate that? Because the way that the state of Vermont is structured, we just cannot cut checks directly and pay individuals directly.
I guess from my point of view, I'm down to like continue to investigate the most efficient pathways to work through sort of these like challenges. I think what I'm hoping is to clarify what our priorities are in general, because I do think there's things we can do right now. I don't think it's all hung up in challenge. So I recognize sort of the like stipend piece requires like a slowdown. So we're not going to be able to do certain things out of the gate that would require that more, like we're trying to set up members of the community to be consulting us on policy determinations, right? That to me is where we're asking to be able to pay people to come in and do that. But I think like to Trey's way earlier point, there's things right out of the gate we could do around outreach engagement that is supportive in its own right, around just plain language communication. Hey, here are opportunities that exist that the state is doing. I do think there's ways right now we could be figuring out how to structure our meetings just in general to make them more accessible. So, and it's concurrent, so I think, there's the RFP can be getting drafted now to try to set ourselves up as soon as possible to be able to pay stipends when that feels like we are in that sort of, hey, we're going to bring groups together and do some advising and consulting around an issue. But in the meantime, let's plan out a vision and a schedule for our public meetings over the coming year, where we feel like it's even going to be in a space and in a forum where people would want to come in the first place. So if we can just be thinking through these different priority areas at the same time, that would be helpful. And I think I keep coming back around to some of the, actually, let me pause there. And just see, I know I want to recognize that we're just low on time. It's 2:43. And so I just want to leave some space to reflect on what I'm hearing and talk about some of the next steps coming out of this. And I'm just looking back at my notes at what everyone shared in the first circle go around, what is your top of mind priority? So just to summarize what I heard is that we have a need consistently from the get around language access. I heard that we need to really have transparent plans and next steps regarding the input we seek before we seek it. So that's sort of us looking out ahead. And that's, to me, that's sort of like, can we define this council's relationship to the covered agencies via the interagency committee so that we kind of know where information goes and what we do with it? So maybe that's a piece to pick up. I heard that we need to address the fact that there's a lot of folks who are having trust issues or don't have the time and capacity or are burdened by responding to questions about their needs right now. And so, that ties to what I also heard about. We've already done a lot of focus groups on environmental justice issues with directly impacted communities through the contract Jennifer was part of. What can we do to show that the state's doing something with that information before we go back and ask some more about what environmental justice issues people are facing? And so again, that takes me back to what is our vehicle for influencing policy with the information we're getting from directly impacted communities? I just keep coming back there. And yeah, those were, yeah. And then also, I heard that in terms of short term, even if we're having an extension on some of these more complex deliverables, that we can still be present and acknowledge the urgency felt in communities and start to bring people things to alleviate those needs now. That there are currently benefits the state offers that folks don't know about that we could be doing about, using this council as a vehicle to get that information out there. So, starting, and maybe this would help too on your end, Gail, right? Starting from a place of here's what we can actually, this is what we as a council can bring to you to support you before we say, what can you give us to support us in the policy making determination? So that is that's my recap of some of that first circle. So I'd love to just open the floor back up for other people's sort of like takeaway thoughts from this dialogue. And if there's anything, again, just bring it home of like, hey, Phoebes, please go home and sort of think this through or bring us a proposal on this piece, would be really appreciated. Yeah, Trey.
Phoebes, I have a lot of energy for what you just said about like before we ask anybody for anything, let's see what we can give and what we can how we can connect. And it may be a matter of this is a little bit of a bridge to the later agenda item that we didn't get as much into, but like I would like to know who I keep getting asked this, and I think this comes up in a lot of meetings where I am in is like who has the list of all the services, who knows, like who has the map of what is available and how to navigate it. And I know it's so complicated, nobody really does, but that's something that our agency partners could help us with. I think if they want to support the work of this council, is to figure out how we could engage, and VHCB should certainly help too. I don't mean to point at A&R or other agencies and not go forward, but I think that's something that we could do. We could show up to events that are already going to happen, if we can, so that if there's places where people already are joyfully gathering, if we can go and offer services or even set up kiosks where we can help people navigate the access to those services, like bring the smart pads and actually do the work with people. That's something Let's Grow Kids did a lot, was actually get people to do the work of organizing while at other events, and I found that was pretty effective. And if we could do some, I know going on the RFP makes a lot of sense. I did a thumbs up for that. We might as well, while we're putting our boots on, turn on the the wood stove at the same time and get that going. But we could also do our own events if there was a way to do them through community organizations where it would be supportive to that organization, where people are just able to gather and there'd be food and celebration without stipends, and again use that as a chance to provide information and access to folks. But I think but more the way that my mind thinks of it is more as like having those groups empowered to tell us how to do that in a way that's going to be best received, as opposed to come to my house and hear the rules for how you navigate within the structures of this state agency or this instrumentality or what have you. I think we need to go to the places. Anyway, sorry, I got very energized by that as you were saying that, Phoebes. I was excited, so I just wanted to get that all out. And I'm going to apologize because I'm going to leave about 2 or 3 minutes early because I have to host a series of meetings right after this. And I want to just get my head into that.
Good. Thank you so much for sharing. It's great to hear. Good to hear your thoughts. Carl, I saw your hand was up. I don't know if it was still up or if somebody else wants to jump in at this point.
Yeah, my hand was up, but Trey actually spoke to what I was going to mention, which is what I identify as a low-hanging fruit to reach community members, is just showing up to events that are already scheduled, already taking place. And with regards to like an identification of programs and resources list, I was thinking that perhaps that could be a task that could be performed in advance by interagency councils. So those were some thoughts. With regards to the first one, my concern is to ask of advisory council members to, give more, show up to these events and do this work given the inadequate per diem. So that is always front and center when talking about how to engage community members. It's just I feel inadequate asking folks to show up in that way when I know that compensation for that is very inadequate. And so it is in that interest that I think we've tried to, identify what will work within a particular community and how can we set that structure up ourselves so that we can work with the representative to the advisory council without asking too much of their time and expertise at this moment. And so those are the interests that personally, as a member of the interagency council, I wrestle with, and as the unit coordinating technical support is just unavoidable. That question is just really unavoidable.
Thanks, Carla. Go ahead, Gail. Oh. Sorry, Gail. I don't know if I'm messing you up, but you can go ahead and
Hi. You had put something out in the email about an event that was happening very shortly. I forget what it was, but I was very interested, and I was just wondering, when you get that information about any of those events, is there somewhere where we can know that they're occurring way ahead of time so we can try to schedule if we can make it there?
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Gail. Glad to get feedback that was helpful. I've been a little on the edge of like when I open up the door to like, oh, I could send you anything that's sort of related to our work. It's like a giant sort of possibility. It's good to know what's helpful, or what felt helpful about that or interesting about that event. I'd be happy to send it as soon in advance as I know. One of the things that Sophie, who was on earlier from the Agency of Natural Resources, is the brand new Community Engagement and Outreach Coordinator for the Climate Action Office. And I've been really talking to her about, I mean, the reality is all climate policy sort of falls under the umbrella of our considerations of environmental justice. So there's just a lot of overlap, especially from the public facing perspective on it. So I bring that up in response to your comment because she, oh geez, my train of thought. Wow, I just totally spaced on where we were at. I apologize.
Sophie, Climate Action Office, VIPS, and the conversations that we've been having internally with her to coordinate outreach events and support their engagement as they think through the second iteration of the climate action plan.
Thanks. Yes. And with that, having a shared sort of place that we're putting related events for public engagement on these topics. Thank you, Carla. So we are brainstorming as agency staff, how do we make it more accessible to the public? And then how do we empower you all as a council, as a vehicle to help us do that? Make sure opportunities like that are known about in advance. So if you all have feedback on the best way for me to get that information to you all, for you to then to both engage with directly and or pass on information, I welcome that, because we are sort of deliberating if we do we need to go do a newsletter route, like a monthly email blast? Is it just real time when events come up, just shoot them over to y'all informally the way I did? So yeah, just welcome feedback on that. And I think the more we sort of build relationships with these other groups, the more knowledge I'll have of these things in advance, so that was through the Land Access and Opportunity Board. And essentially what that event's happening through, again, a third party sort of community organization that's nimble enough to put together the sort of event that has childcare, that has wellness workshops, that is paying folks to be there in a way the state agencies have a really hard time being nimble like that. So, there's a partnership there, and VHCB, Trey can speak to, the Land Access and Opportunity Board is kind of quasi, it sits with VHCB, so it's not quite a government and, government tied entity the way we are, but just wanted to also put that out there. That's how they were able to put together an event like that. But I think it is a great example of the kind of events we would want to put together in the future. So it's helpful to be able to see what those look like. Okay. Well, in our last 5 minutes, I've heard from a few folks, but again, closing thoughts on just, sort of short-term desires in this realm to see move forward, or just closing thoughts that are important. I'm gonna, I'll write up the notes from this meeting and from Wednesday's meeting with the other members and report back my takeaway of what I think action steps should be. But just welcome any closing thoughts on the conversation from today.
So I know that you're going to sort of loop back with the other small group, and I would be really curious to know where their feedback overlaps and intersects with ours. So what should we expect from you after that second meeting?
Yeah, I will. I'll put together minute notes like we always do from both meetings, and the recordings will be available for both meetings. So I'll make sure that's packaged and sent, but then I'll also just do my own quicker, more succinct bullet of some of the key takeaways in each of these topics that we heard. So areas of, like you said, some areas of overlap and not. Since we talked about the timeline here, probably start with the same thing there and see if anyone wants to touch base about that piece, and then get into community engagement. And then, so I'll just organize some takeaways by topic and send that out within, by the end of next week, I will say for sure, and as soon as I can within that framework.
Will there be an opportunity for us to respond to one another, to each other, the people who were, so for example, somebody in the other group may have brought up a really great point on, I don't know, the 3-year look back thing. I know you're going to sort of disseminate to everybody the takeaways, but what if we want to pick up on one of those threads? Do we wait until the next meeting? I guess that's what makes sense.
Yeah, that's a good question, Susanna. And I don't see why we should wait for the next meeting. Perhaps through a survey we can capture after this group has had an opportunity to review the minutes and the notes that FIPS is producing, whether there is a conversation that needs to take place. Mm-hmm. And then perhaps through a survey we can capture this. Specifically, the conversation about the recalibration is time sensitive, since we're trying to coordinate this approach not statewide, but with external stakeholders. So at least with that particular item, I think we should try to identify a process that will allow that conversation to take place before our next joint meeting. Peeps, do you have any thoughts with regards to this particular?
Only insofar as the survey process can still feel a little like we're in pockets of information without exchanging ideas. I really loved having this small group setting to be able to get into things more. One of the things that Mariana actually brought up around this topic, and she's going to be in Wednesday's meeting, of course, but this is a great example already, is like, do we want a subgroup, a task group that's below quorum that kind of picks up this thread and like carries forward community engagement? And so I'm trying to think of mechanisms that don't trigger those sort of public meeting requirements. So we can't kind of open up the full forum on email, but we could we could certainly have some other small group conversations if there's just a topic of interest. So maybe I could just put that ask out there, you know, in the email itself. You know, anybody want to, you know, are there folks who would like to pick up a smaller subgroup conversation of these themes together and put that? Otherwise, we are left with December 18th as our next joint meeting. But that also has not been fully agenda planned out. So if we want to take an hour for the advisory council to get together by themselves and just sort of regroup on all of this, we can do that. So I think those are those kind of vehicles that popped to mind for me.
Okay, that's really helpful. And I know we're at time. I guess just to quickly answer on that question, I am a fan of smaller subgroups. I think that they require trust, right?
Yes.
That peers on a working group trust each other to look at an issue and, you know, fairly and thoroughly, and to come back with good suggestions. So but I'm a big fan of it because there's a lot of work we need to be doing. And I think if we always want to do it as big group, then we have to take the tasks one by one, as opposed to being able to work on things simultaneously and in parallel. So I'm a big fan of that. And I think for those of us who are struggling with the timeline being too long, subgroups can be a really great way to help us not have to push things out that far. So for whatever it's worth, yeah, I would welcome that as a recommendation.
And I would like to quickly identify, and I know it's 301, that would still leave the question about how to communicate and exchange points of view with the larger group. So that's still, you know, if we go the route of the task groups, recognizing that, you know, there's going to be like, a trust that's gonna be entrusted, I mean, repetitive, to that particular task group, that there has to be a channel of communicating regularly with the larger group. And so that question, your first question, still open. And so Phoebes, perhaps you and I can touch base about what kind of mechanism we can put together to do that broader sharing of information.
Yeah, this has been sort of organically emerging. I think it makes a ton of sense. And as we define the structure of public meetings for 2024, we can contemplate where in this is there sort of an organic place for reporting out and input, and even maybe up now. I would love right now to be drafting just like basic chartering language, you know, that sets those expectations and things. And I'm sure there's, you know, places to borrow from for that. So I'm already in my head doing that homework. I will continue that homework because I think it's really on point of clarifying task groups. And we already are started going down that road. You know, there is a task group working on the benefit spending guidance. It's a little bit, you know, it's A&R's territory, but advisory council members are on that group. And that is a setting where smaller conversations can happen between people that are really focused. That's not the public meeting. So it's kind of already happening. It'd be good for it to be transparent and us to name, hey, there are 4 official task groups tied to this work. Here's who's on them. Here's how you communicate with them, and have that be really transparent going into 2024. Thank you, Susanna. Appreciate you. Gail, did you have a thought? No, okay. Okay. Great. Well, thank you so much. Appreciate the small setting.
Thank you very much. Gail, feel better.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone. Have a good one.
Thank you,
Bye.
Bridget.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you, Bridget.
Bye.
Bye, Susanna. Thank you. Great. And Carla, I need to now take a minute and transition back home. Hopefully internet. Okay.